Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Johnny Midnight proudly brings to you the Midnight Express Podcast!
Hey guys, welcome to episode 13 of the Midnight Express Podcast. Episode 12 again seems to go down well, it's all going nicely. The Phil Powers podcast was enjoyed by everyone I've spoke to. As I'll mention in a minute in the podcast interview today, I went to Drew McDonald's funeral this last Wednesday, and a number of the boys there said they'd listened to it and the previous podcasts and enjoyed it. Again, I mentioned this in the main podcast interview in a minute. Obviously Drew's funeral on Wednesday, an emotional affair, fantastic send-off for a great man. There was hundreds and hundreds of people there. Probably not much else I can say about that hasn't already been said by me and multiple other people. Facebook and Twitter was just awash with tributes to Drew after he died last week. So, not much else I can say. I'll miss him, a lot of other people will miss him. But on to this week's podcast, episode 13, is with a guy called Johnny Moss. Now, anyone that's been into British wrestling for the last 15 years or so should know the name, doesn't need a massive level of introduction. If you don't know him, hopefully you will do by the end of this interview.
For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Right, guys, welcome to the podcast interview with none other than Johnny Moss. So I gave you a little bit of an introduction to Johnny a minute ago before we came into the interview. So first things first, Johnny, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, John. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Cool. So just looking back, I'm on the internet now looking at your ProWrestlingWiki.com page, and I didn't realise, Johnny, you're actually younger than me. In the last podcast, I interviewed Phil Powers, who's about 18 months older, but started wrestling 10 years before me, which is slightly depressing. I knew that we were a similar age, but I thought, to be honest, you were a fraction older, but you were born 3 weeks after me, if this date of birth is correct. But you started, according to what I've got in front of me here, training with Andre Baker down in Hammerlock in about 1998, is that right?
Well, I had my first match in 98, but I actually started training in 1997.
Cool, good stuff. Now, it's quite a trek for you, because you're based up in Cumbria, and getting all the way down to Kent must have taken quite some effort.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. I've said it a few times before. I used to get the coach to the night, the National Express coach from Whitehaven to Carlisle, then Carlisle to London, then get on the tube across to, I think it was Victoria, then get a train from Victoria to Sittingbourne. Used to take about 14 hours or something altogether.
And I presume that was, because at that point in time, that was the only option if you wanted to go to a wrestling school.
It was, yes, as far as I knew anyways, because I'd seen the adverts in Power Slam magazine, and, I wrote off them and, I said I wanted to come to the summer camp, and that was the first time I went down there, just topped on a coach, and I loved everything. I loved it. I was excited. I loved the journeys at the time. Even though they were long, and I'd hate to do them now. I'd be bored to death. But at the time, I was that excited. I didn't care.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's exciting when you're sort of 17, 18, something like that. It's a big deal. Yeah, cool. So you heard about it through Power Slam, and what, you went to a summer camp in 97? Would that have been?
Yeah, 97. It was. Yeah, St Mary's Bay. It was in like an old army barracks. It was good. It was a great time. It was brilliant.
And what were your first impressions of the setup walking in that first day?
Well, I actually got there a bit late, and everybody was gathered around in a circle, and they were all shooting with each other, like doing shoot wrestling. I was like, shit, what's this? But it was great, and I loved that part of it too. Mm-hmm. And that really got me interested in submission and catch star wrestling, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. I felt like death. On about the Wednesday, I could hardly get out of bed. Yeah. But, it was a tremendous experience.
Cool. And then you had your first match in '98. What was the first match?
It was with a lad called Alan Johnson from Sheffield.
I know Alan well. Yeah.
Yeah. Alan had, I think, he had a couple of matches before me, and it's probably embarrassing looking back on it now. Had a crappy little green and white singlet on. His little white, green amateur wrestling boots. I'd say I looked like a pixie. I was probably about 4 stone lighter than what I am now too.
Cool. And then you proceeded to have matches over the course of the next couple of years. Did you stay at Hammerlock for?
Oh yeah, I was at Hammerlock for a long time. It was a good learning curve because Andre would do like 2s and maybe 5 10 days, and a lot of them shows were like King of the Ring style tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
So often I was wrestling there 3 times a night. So you were getting a lot of matches under your belt in quite a short period of time.
Of course. And then, actually, I forgot, of course, you were involved with the setup of the Hammerlock School up in Sheffield. Was that in about 2001 they set that up?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I know that Andre had been very keen for me to get a school set up of my own up here. It's only took me 15 years since he mentioned it. But yeah, but at the time I wasn't. It was something I didn't really want to put my full effort into it. So me and Alan both did it together.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it was based in Sheffield, and we did it for a while, and I just sort of left Alan to his own devices, really.
Presumably it was in Sheffield because Alan was keen to do it and obviously had contacts and whatever in Sheffield.
Yeah, that's right. And Sheffield's probably a more central location than where I'm at, really, to be honest.
Of course,
I remember a couple of good lads going there. Like, I know El Ligero come at the first few sessions, for definite.
Yeah, well, Ligero, Chris Travis.
Yeah.
I joined that school a little bit after. I think you just stopped. I think you became less and less frequent by the time I started in early 2003. But no, definitely some good guys came out of there. Alan's training, bless him, when he paid attention, his training was brilliant. But he was often easily distracted by someone engaging him in a conversation, which took the entire training session while we amused ourselves.
Oh, well, that's different to how I do it. There's no talking aloud, you see.
I can imagine. Cool.
And that's just by me taking the piss, and that's different.
Any particular great memories or stories from your time at Hammerlock around that time?
Yeah, there was loads happening. It was great. It was a great atmosphere. It was a good laugh too. You were like a bit of a family, really. You were almost like a bit of a travelling circus. And there was plenty of freaks, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd travel in the back of the van, and Andre driving like a nutter to get the venues quick as possible because we're always setting off late. So you're in the back of the van and cramped up with the ring, about 8, 10 of us. You get there, put the ring up, do however many matches you have to do, take the ring down, get in the back of the van, normally with a few cans, back to Andre's house, a bit of a piss up, and then do it all again the next day. It was great.
So who else was on the team around that time? Would they still have had your likes of Johnny Storm and Alex Shane still there, or they'd left by that point?
No, they'd left when I started, but it was guys like John Ryan and Gary Steele, folk like that, real good guys. You got Danny Garnell.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Had some laughs. At the time, Hammerlock was involved with the NWA, so we used to go to the conventions once a year as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
To America, went to places like Charlotte, Nashville, Florida, Texas, West Virginia, not so good. But the likes of Florida and Nashville were brilliant.
So were you with Gary Steele when he won the NWA title then in one of those weeks?
Yeah, I was there with him because they actually they filmed a documentary of us all going over there. It was called WrestleManiacs, and that was over to Charlotte in 1999. And yeah, I was there. It was the Grady Cole Centre. It was. I can't remember the exact date, but when Gary beat a Gower and Brian Anthony, it was in a 3-way.
Cool. Presumably you worked on that show as well, did you?
Yeah, I was in a Cruiserweight Battle Royal, believe it or not.
You must have been lighter than you are now then.
I was like that, a lot like that. Actually, Chris Hero was in it as well.
Yeah.
I think Chris Hero, Ed Paris, who looked like he was going to do something at the time, but don't hear much of him now.
He got signed to WCW, didn't he? Right before the end, yeah.
Him and AJ went together, yeah. But you wouldn't recognise Chris Hero neither.
No.
No, definitely not. No, he's like podgy thing with a short hair. With short hair, crew cut.
Well, to be honest, isn't he a podgy thing with a long haircut now? on and off, anyway. Seems to vary.
It was his outfit wasn't as flashy, that's for certain.
Cool, good stuff. And then did you then start to branch out over the coming years to working for other promotions?
Yeah, I would say early 2000s. I started working for different people, and then Andre sort of lost interest a wee bit, to be honest, and just sort of branched out and just worked for whoever. And I got a call. I started working in Europe quite early on, over in Holland and Germany. And ever since then, I've been all over, really, all over Europe.
Yeah, good stuff, cool. Any particular sort of good stories or memories from times in Europe?
I can't really remember them, I was too drunk.
I was going to say anything you can repeat, that's always the problem with these, isn't it?
I've had a few scrapes. I once lost my passport in Germany. Didn't think I was going to get home. I've been to the wrong airport a couple of times when I was in France. Got a bus to Charles de Gaulle Airport. I should have been to the other airport. It cost me 70 quid in a taxi, and I missed my flight. I missed a few flights. Missed a flight from Holland as well because I was absolutely paralytic. Yeah. So I did. I tell you, some people don't believe it when I tell them, but I've been to the wrong airport a couple of times. You know, when I was going over to France to do a tour for American Wrestling Rampage, they sent me 2 sets of flight details, and I thought the one to Newcastle was one I was going to get.
Mm.
So I drove to Newcastle. Not a bad drive for me. It's 2 hours. And British Airways flight too. I thought that's good airline. Went to check in. No, you're not on here.
Mm.
Said you better have a look here. I said, hey, this flight here, 6:10 in the morning. I got up at 2 o'clock to get it, mind. I was, no. I said, what? Phone the promoter. I'm not on this flight. He goes, well, no, because you're supposed to be flying from Manchester.
Ooh.
So I had to drive to Manchester, but luckily it was an afternoon flight. And that was the start of the tour. So things could only get better from there, couldn't they?
Of course, yeah. You funny mentioned about stories that you can repeat. This last Wednesday, I went to Drew McDonald's funeral up in Leeds, and me and some of the boys, Frankie Sloans and Rampage Browns, etc., were talking about some of the various stories that perhaps weren't suitable to make the podcast interviews I did with them.
I think most of Drew's stories wouldn't be suitable to make any podcast.
Yeah, I think unfortunately so, yeah. And that's part of the downside, really, to this. It's great to get some stories out there, but a lot of them either incriminate certain people, not Drew in that case, but just in general, a lot of them perhaps aren't shareable for public knowledge. But you also reminded me as well, saying a second ago about... you referred to them as a bunch of freaks. It was funny, on just after we finished the funeral, they were doing the cremation. I was stood outside and I was chatting to Colossus Kennedy, who's 6'7", maybe 25 stone, a big boy, and Little Legs, who's 3 foot tall.
Yeah.
I was stood chatting to the both at the same time. It was like a game of tennis. I was looking up and down, turning between the conversation, and I thought, only in wrestling would you be having such a conversation.
Yeah, that's like a circus act right there, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah. I explained to my girlfriend afterwards some of the people that had been at the funeral and what have you, and she said I sounded like the most normal person there, and I was like, possibly, and that's saying something.
Yeah, I heard it was a good turnout.
It was immense. The chapel was a relatively small one, maybe got like 100 odd seats in there, so that was rammed within seconds, and there was probably about 300 or 400 people for guests stood outside.
Nice.
Yeah, hell of a turnout, and the vast majority of them then made it to like a working men's club in Leeds for the do afterwards. No, it was an amazing turnout. A real who's who as well of British wrestling, past and present.
Oh, absolutely.
So I didn't recognise a lot of the older guys, but then James Mason, who's obviously been around for well over 20 years now, we'd be chatting to someone and he'd walk off, and James would go, "Do you know that was Johnny Kincaid?" or "Do you know that was Mal Sanders?" or so and so. And I was like, "Geez."
Yeah, I mean, Drew sort of like bridged the gap really, because he belonged with the old school because he was there, you know. I think he's debuted about 31, 32 years ago, so he was in with all the old timers from the World of Sport era, but then he still kept himself fresh, and you know he's in with all the new lads too. So it's great that he was well respected by both generations.
Yeah, definitely, it was a great turnout, and he'll be missed by a lot of people, definitely. Cool. So then throughout the sort of the 2000s, you carried on working obviously in Europe. I know you were involved with the relaunched FWA in 2009. Did you do anything with any of the other sort of more internet-y type promotions around that time?
Yeah, I worked for a bunch of people back then. But yeah, the FWA Resurrection thing, it sounded good at the time. It really did. And I give Alex his due. He was really positive, and he made Alex go back a long way because he was there at Hamlock. He was like doing a bit of instructing. And me and Alex actually teamed a couple of times as well, you know, in tag matches when I first debuted. And he was really keen to get behind me, and he helped me a bit, you know, with my character and what have you. But then it started getting a bit messy with contracts and stuff, and people just sort of lost interest with it again, which was a shame because it did look very promising. Yeah,
it did seem to have some new and different ideas and a bit of the direction. And you're right, it gave you a push. Did you get to the final of that title tournament they had? Is that right, against Martin Stone?
Yeah, I definitely worked with Martin there. Yeah, I don't know if it was a final, semi-final, or what, but yeah, I worked with Martin. But I think Alex had unfortunately just tried to overcomplicate things slightly with you know, these contracts that everybody wants to sign. Nobody wants to sign a contract.
No, of course not. Not for the amount of money you're making in British wrestling.
Not unless it's for mega bucks, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I think just try to overcomplicate it. I think really, and if it had kept it simple and just did it as it was, and you know, try to keep it going, who knows?
No, it's always worth trying for different approaches and what have you, and you never know what's going to work.
No, that's right.
And would that have been around the time as well? I remember you did a match or two or so for TNA in one of their European tours. Was that around the same time?
I just did that one match. That one match was at Wembley against Jarrett.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I know he took on someone. I was going to say local, but not really local to London. About 400 mile away. He worked with Lionheart in Scotland, and he worked with Murat Bosporus in Germany. Even though Murat's from Turkey, so
I was going to say it's Turkish Murat is.
Yeah, I don't know that come about.
It's close enough.
And I worked with him in London. That was a great experience for me. It was a good setup at the time. It was really good. Jarrett was a great fella, and the crowd was awesome. But I knew it was a one-shot deal, and I was happy with that.
So how did that all come about? Were you already in contact with them, or?
I just got a message. Actually, it was Doug Williams who was the go-between. Mm-hmm. Just asked me if I was busy on whatever it was, January 27th. Would I like to do? Jarrett wants to know if you want to work for TNA against him. I was like, yeah, no problem at all. And that just escalated from there. Did a few bits of did some media with the Star and the Mirror. Mm-hmm. One day down in London, then did the match, and that was it.
So there was never any potential for anything more to happen with that?
I don't know. They seemed keen at the time. Everyone I spoke to was keen, like Jarrett D'Lo and even Dixie and that. But I wasn't bothered either way. It was no problem for me. I just seen it as like a one-shot deal, and it was what it was. I went there, had a good time. It gave me a wee bit of exposure, and that was it for me.
Speaking of the sort of big American promotions, have you ever had any contact with WWE? Because you'd think, really, looking at you and watching you wrestle, then you're the sort of guy that WWE and TNA would potentially like?
Yeah, I have had some contact with WWE over the years, initially actually through Drew, and then through Robbie, and things just didn't work out, and believe it or not, my physique was actually considered a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I'd gone too far one way, to be honest.
Right, fair enough.
You know what I mean? I think they were bothered about whether I would fit in with their particular program without actually asking me whether I could or couldn't.
Sure, yeah. Understand, yeah.
They jumped to their own conclusion. But either way, I'm happy with that too. I'm not bothered.
Cool. And then, so the last few years, then do you still work much in Europe nowadays?
Yeah, I do the odd one for WXW, where I've got some that lined up in Austria in May, and then Holland after that for another group that I work for, Kenzo Richards. He's a good guy. I do work some shows for him. And then over in Austria for Michael Kovacs, another friend of mine. Yeah, so, and then I'm actually going to the Middle East in April. I was there 18 months ago in Qatar, for Qatar Pro Wrestling.
Cool.
And they really do look after you.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 3 nights. We did 3 shows, but this time we're going to do 5. And I think they got the likes of Alberto Del Rio, Bobby Lashley, Chris Masters, Carlito. I think even Booker T's coming in. They got Polly and a host of others. It's a real good setup.
Do they get good crowds there? Do they?
Yeah, it was great last time because there was no traveling involved once we were there. All 3 shows were in the same building.
Perfect.
So it was great for us. Like 38 degrees, red hot. Marvellous. Jet like royalty.
I was about to say that he said they look after you there, presumably. So what?
Yeah. Nobody was arguing with you over 50 pence for travel expenses. You know what I mean?
I'm just trying to remember who it was now. I remember a promoter. This might ring a bell with you. I only worked for him once or twice, and I've forgotten his name now. Who used basically Google Maps before the show to work out the exact mileage each of the wrestlers had done, and therefore down to the exact penny how much expenses they'd need. So I got an envelope off him. I can't think who it was now. It'd say something like Sheffield to wherever we were, 197 miles return trip, and then the calculation would be the exact amount of petrol money down to like the 10p in there.
I know a few people that have done that.
You couldn't really argue because technically it was the right sort of calculation, but you'd sort of think, well, just round it up to 20 quid or 30 quid or whatever it may be. But I suppose that's probably where his margin was. That's where his profit lied.
I know a few promoters that have done that, definitely.
And to be honest, it could be a lot worse. I've known plenty of promoters try not to give you your expenses, which is obviously a lot worse.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know what to do with them.
Yeah. I did a show in Sheffield 3.5 years ago. It was a series of shows over a weekend. I wrestled Alan Johnson, actually, the only time I wrestled him on the middle night of the Saturday. And the promoter there, the first night was a good turnout. Second and third night, he didn't seem to have actually promoted. There was literally 25 or so people there both nights. And you could see him sort of trying to edge away from sort of everyone's payment out until a few of the boys had a word with him, shall we say.
I've been there, definitely.
Course,
Sorry to say. No money, no mossy. That's my motto.
Of course, definitely. Cool. Any other sort of particularly, I mean, obviously there's 17 years of career there to cover. Any stories you can share, those humorous escapades that are repeatable in such a forum?
I've had plenty, but once you're put on the spot, it's hard to think of any in particular. I can remember once hiding John Ryan's passport when we were in where was it? We were in Holland, and he left his passport on the side in the hotel, so just put it in my back pocket. Then we were at the waiting to get the ferry. Well, waiting to get the coach. We were actually, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he was there, and we were like, he's pleading with the driver to let him on. He said, no, passport, no. And then we leave. He was stood there, poor bugger. He was nearly crying. And just as the bus was about to take off, I shouted at the driver to stop, and just waved John's passport up at the window. So we got on. Said, you bastard! I think he was that relieved to have his passport that he wasn't there. He wasn't as mad as what I thought he'd be. We used to do all sorts of pranks, like people's when they're asleep, shaving someone's beard off, putting it in a cup, and then super gluing the cup to their forehead. Stuff like that.
It's funny as well. I was talking to Frankie Sloan at Drew's funeral and Rampage Brown there as well about a lot of the stories that potentially you could tell. Whilst a lot of them are absolutely hilarious to the boys who are there, they perhaps don't necessarily come across well on a podcast because they either aren't particularly funny, or in some cases you just sound like an absolute mentalist with some of the stuff that you might tell normal people who perhaps don't do such things.
And I'll tell you one that happened to me, and I was stopping down at Andre's house. I always used to stop there. I can't remember where we'd been. We rested for 3 or 4 days. Imagine it. And last year, up all night drinking. I woke up on the sofa. They said, John, you're gonna have to get up. You're gonna miss your train. I was like, oh shit. So he took me down to the station. There was him and like three or four other boys, and they dropped me off at the station. And I'm stumbling out the car, and they're there stood for ages, waving, sending me off. It was like something off a film, a big romantic send-off, and they're all smiling. I thought, oh, isn't that nice? That's really pleasant. That what a nice way to end 3 or 4 days of fun. Brilliant, that nice big send-off. Still waving. I'm thinking, aye, all right, okay, bye. So I got my ticket. We got on the train, and I was sat on the train for ages until the conductor says, "Can I just tell you, sir, you've got something wrote on your forehead." I thought, go on then. I go, what does it say? And without repeating the word, it rhymed with hunt. So now I know why the bastards were stood there laughing.
Oh, I was going to say, alarm bells should have been ringing then when the boys were being nice to you, leaving you on.
Why are they being so nice?
I only got done once with that. We were several times people tried, but I've always, even when I'm asleep, got a reasonably good sort of sixth sense. I remember about 2 or 3 occasions literally waking up and grabbing Mikey Whiplash by the wrist. He's about to right on my face. But one time, I think it was actually Julio Torres got me and wrote wanker and drew a cock on my head and all that sort of stuff. And I walked into the Butlins skyline with probably several hundred people there until I realised, obviously, as I walked past them, all the people looking and laughing at me, which usually happens, but it was a lot more than normal. So I thought something's obviously happened here.
They're just little things. It's nothing. No one's getting hurt, or it's nothing harmful. There's a lot of jokes, practical jokes that damage people's property and stuff. And was not much like there wasn't a lot of that going on really. It was just harmless fun, you know, like rubbing deep heat on people's towels and stuff like that. So then they get a shower and they were drying their bollocks and stuff that be on fire.
You don't seem to get quite so much of the damaging people's property type practical jokes in British and European wrestling. Like, you hear a lot of the stories coming out of sort of America and Canada. There's a lot of like cutting people's stuff up, whereas over here, I think most of the boys would think that was a bit much, shall we say?
Yeah, a bit much.
Yeah, no one really benefits. It's just a short-term laugh, but it's not worth it. Whereas, like you said, a bit of deep heat, a bit of momentarily embarrassing someone is always worth a laugh.
We used to just be playing jokes on each other all the time, just little stuff that you wouldn't even remember because it was just like, you know, it's just a laugh at the time. But now you don't see it.
No, there's definitely less of it. Yeah.
Oh. We got Chris Travis with a good one once. Where we traveled. This is just a little simple thing as well. But they picked me up at Carlisle. I think who was driving? Well, I know. Oh, Kirby was driving. I think Mike Kirby was driving.
Yeah.
And Ollie was in the back with Travis. So anyways, Travis kept falling asleep. I said, and this time he was flat out. I says, right, Martin. I said, when I tap you on the shoulder, ram your brake on, not too hard, like, ram your brake on, and we'll all scream. So we hit the brake and we all just went, ah, shit! And he jumped up. I thought we were going to crash. Well, the poor bastard, I would say, for half an hour, 45 minutes, she was, I can't, my heart won't slow down. My heart won't slow down. Oh, you bastards, you bastards. Oh, I couldn't give him nearly a heart attack.
Poor old Trav.
But, I know, poor lad. But it's just daft stuff to put your time in, you know.
Cool. And then, so obviously you mentioned right at the start of the podcast about the school. You opened up your school finally up in Cumbria. What, about a year ago now, would it be?
No, it's only been open since October.
Oh, really? Okay, right.
Yeah, no, it seems long for me. I feel like I've been open forever.
How's that going?
Brilliant. Yeah, really well. I've had guys from all over come to train me, abroad and everything.
Cool.
There's from Holland, Finland. There's a lad from Australia just training me this week.
Mm-hmm.
A lad from France coming over shortly. I've even had inquiries from as far as Chile. And there's a lad from California wanting to come over for a month too.
Cool. Are these guys then that have done a bit of training elsewhere then and just want to sort of
Some have,
broaden their horizons?
The lad that was just in with me last week, Josh Staccato, or Josh Shooter as he calls himself, he's been wrestling. He's only 21-year-old, but he'd been wrestling 5 years in Australia and he'd done a bit in Japan. He was good. Yeah, he was really good. But I've had like the lad from Finland who was with me for 2 or 3 weeks. He'd had no training whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I get all sorts of people coming. I get a lot of people that have trained elsewhere and they come and see me and they're like, oh shit, I didn't realise you did it like that.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of schools that open up where the guys that are training people shouldn't even be wrestling themselves.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, of course. Any potential sort of stars of the future in the school at the moment?
Absolutely, yeah. I've got some real good lads in there. Don't like to single people out as such, but I've got one young lad, Josh. He's only 16. He's got real potential. He does this parkour stuff, you know, where they basically run around the street and do flips and jumps over park benches and all sorts of crazy shit. But yeah, he's really dedicated too, and I'm hoping to have him on shows in the next couple of months. But then I've got other lads who would only they're nipping at his heels. They're not far, you know. They're not far behind him.
Do you run your own shows then as well, or just get them on other promoters' shows? Do you mean?
No, I'm not going to. I don't think I'm going to run my own shows, but I've got plenty of contacts. I could get them on shows tomorrow, no problem.
Yeah.
And I've had promoters say to me, if any of your lads are doing well, give me a shout. So there is work for them. I can't get them work. You never know. I may do the odd trainee show. I don't really like the term trainee show or academy show, whatever you know. But I've no plans to. But never say never.
Any words of wisdom for sort of aspiring pro wrestlers out there? Anything that you would advise them to do or not do?
Yes, try and get in cardiovascular shape. At least look the part. I'm not saying you have to look like Dave Bautista, but at least look like you haven't been dragged off the street, or you look like your next door neighbour that you could beat the shit out of. At least look like you could participate in an athletic contest. That's the only thing I'll say.
Yeah, definitely. I've mentioned it several times in the podcast. I genuinely do not understand when, I'm all for people following the dream and all that, but if you've got a dream or to do something and you see it on TV, then surely it's pretty obvious that you need to have a certain amount of athletic ability, a certain degree of luck and what have you. And you get some of these guys turn up. It was the same when I first started at school in Sheffield, and I was like, at what point did you look in the mirror and think, I should be a pro wrestler?
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, everybody who watches, well, used WWE or WWF, as I watched it then, as an example, they look at that and that's what they aspire to be. So first things first, they don't know how to wrestle. You could make a start by trying to look like them.
Yeah.
At least try and look like that before you start to wrestle, because if you don't look like that, you never, I just don't know what goes through people's heads.
And if anything, I've mentioned this several times, the look of a wrestler is actually it probably more important than it is in any other industry, because if, say, for example, I don't know, Dale Winton decided to take up UFC and win the heavyweight title, you couldn't argue, because he'd obviously have beaten all those people on the way, irrespective of how he may look and come across.
That's a great example.
But because of the way wrestling is, people know to some degree it's, shall we say, not a legitimate sport, so therefore you've got to give them that ability to suspend their disbelief, and if the way you look doesn't give them that, you're on to a loser right from the start.
You don't want people looking in the audience thinking, come on, this guy, he couldn't knock the skin of a rice pudding, this is obviously bollocks.
Yeah.
You don't want them looking at that, and I'm not saying, people's probably going to say, oh, well, he's into bodybuilding, he looks like this and he looks like that, but I'm not saying that. I'm not saying everybody should be, massive and ripped or whatever. Just look athletic. Train. I mean, come on, people must realise it takes a hell of a lot of effort and a lot of stamina to wrestle. Yeah. You could, give yourself a fighting chance.
You think it'd be obvious, but apparently not to some people.
No, it's nuts. Yeah, nuts.
Good. Anything else you want to share with us, Johnny? So we've got a 17-year career there, or any other stories jumping out of there, or memories, anything to share with the listeners?
Trying to think now. I mean, when you do that much over the years, and I've been dropping my head quite a lot, and my memory is absolutely terrible. Honestly, absolute rubbish. I forget what I'm constantly saying to my missus, what was I going to do? What was I going to do? She's like, I don't know. What were you going to do? Terrible. You know the old scenario where you see you walk into a room and you don't know what you walked in for? That's like me.
Yeah.
Terrible. And I guarantee you right now, when I'll go to bed later on tonight and I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, shit, why didn't I say that on the podcast? Or I should have said this, I should have said that. But it's a great... It's a great life if anybody wants to get into it, and it's a great way to see the world too. But you've got to apply yourself, and you've got to be motivated. I hear people saying to me, "Oh, I'd love to come and train at your school, but you'd be too far away." I said, "Well, how far? Where do you live?" "I live in Manchester." I said, "Do you drive?" "Yeah." "It's only bloody 2 hours."
20 minutes. A couple of hours. Yeah.
Absolute pathetic. Yeah. Oh, I'd love to. Oh, that's because people have been spoiled, you see, now.
Yeah.
Schools that crop up everywhere, and most people have got one on the doorstep. Mm-hmm. So they don't want to travel. But that's another thing. In the wrestling business, what's it renowned for? Travelling.
Yeah.
So that's why, to me, travelling's no big deal, because I was travelling to Kent just to learn. So I already had that under my belt. I was used to long journeys and shitty experiences on buses, trains, and what have you. I think once someone says that
yeah, of course, it's not happening, is it?
It's not happening for them.
No,
definitely not. You can tell straight away. Like if you've got someone who's coming from Australia over here just to train, then then you've got someone who doesn't want to drive 2 hours.
Funnily enough, the Australians particularly do have a reputation for their willingness to travel to learn. Because my other main thing is I work in fitness. And the number of courses I've been on where there've been Australians who've literally flown from Australia to London or wherever the course may be just to come and do a course. Now, obviously, that's partly because there's only so much going on in Australia, but they definitely have that attitude of being willing to put themselves out to get where they want to get to.
Yeah, it's the only way. It's the only way to get good. To get as much experience under your belt as possible.
Of course.
And you pick little bits from everywhere you've been, and you mould yourself. You just pick this bit from that country, this bit from that country, and because when you're only young and you're only a couple of years into the wrestling job, you're just finding yourself really. So you've got to try everything to see what fits and what doesn't.
Definitely. Cool. I think we've covered pretty much everything there. So I hope you guys listening at home enjoyed that. Johnny, thanks for your time.
That's no problem, John. No problem at all. I'd just like to mention, if anybody is interested in training to be a professional wrestler, please check out the website, which is mosswrestlingschool.com, or they can check out the Facebook page as well, Johnny Moss School of Wrestling. Got videos on there of training sessions that we've done. We've had Marty Jones there recently, and Marty Jones and Johnny Saint are going to come together at Easter weekend, which will be
awesome.
That should be a hell of a session. Absolutely.
Definitely. Nice one. Cheers, Johnny.
Thanks, John. Cheers, mate.
Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Episode 13 there with Johnny Moss. Again, as always, really appreciate if you guys help share this, help spread the word. It's mepodcast.co.uk, facebook.com and twitter.com/mepodcast. If you can share anything, tell your friends about it, iTunes rating, all that sort of stuff, it's all good. As I mentioned before, this podcast is not a moneymaker for me. It technically does cost me a little bit of money. I have to promote the Facebook posts. I have to host it. It's not a massive amount, but it'd be nice to help spread the word to make that even more worthwhile, that bit of an investment I'm making there. But again, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I shall see you next week.